Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is this is a virtual Beit Midrash. This is a house of learning. And in a Beit Midrash, people are allowed to call out questions, call out comments. If you ever walk into a yeshiva, there's like a buzz, right? There's like a, you hear the sort of back and forth of learning. So this is not just a sort of frontal delivery, but this is an active session. And so I just, so you shouldn't, be shy. And if there's a question, a comment, jump right in. So my idea was really to really give a taste of Talmud. Talmud is something that I love to learn. I've been learning Gemara for years. Most recently not as much as I would like. So I have selfish motives to really, dive into some Gemara. But I thought we would start with there we go. Okay. So there's a bracha that we recite when we learn Torah. We say this every day in the morning in case you didn't say it yet today, or if you want to say it again because we are about to learn together. We say the bracha together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher Torah. Lasok is really to make busy, so we're making ourselves busy with the words of Torah. So the Talmud is a treasure trove of everything, of information, of thought, of discourse, of law, tradition, history, midrash, mysticism. But at its core, I think it's a central text in rabbinic Judaism, consisting of the Mishna and the Gemara. So someone mentioned Mishnah before. These are this is the Talmud. First of all, the word Talmud comes from the Shorish limud, to learn. Lamed mem daled. And so really the backbone of the Talmud is the Mishnah and Gemara, which we will look a bit deeper into soon. It's written in Hebrew and Aramaic, which was the sort of language of the time. And it serves as a guide to Jewish law and ethics, philosophy, and tradition. But really, I would put law first. This is really a legal set of texts that really discuss many, many laws, many mitzvot, and all the discourse surrounding them.
Michael, I'm on a Zoom. I'll call you to take when it's over.
Maybe we should mute each other. Mute. I think so.
Yeah.
You want mute?
Yeah, you should mute us.
Yeah, we should mute.
Well, do I have to mute, or can we self?
You can do it. Well, you can do it.
Self-aware,
whatever you want.
Okay. So the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a foundational text of Jewish law, forming the core of the Talmud and laying the groundwork for much of the Jewish religious practice. Its history spans from the early centuries CE and reflects the evolution of Jewish life following the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, so I'm just going to mute everybody, and if you'd like to comment or jump in, please unmute yourselves. You should be able to. Is that okay? Rhoda, you have a question?
I forgot the year of the destruction of the Second Temple. 500 and something, 85.
That's the first temple was 586 BCE. The second temple was 70 CE.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying this goes until the destruction of the Second Temple?
So the Mishnah took centuries to actually accumulate. So for centuries, and we'll see soon, Tanaim they were called, were sort of collecting documents, transcribing documents. But it was really after the Second Temple that, which is our next note, that the Mishnah was compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince. Right, Nasi was really in reference to his title, not really to his. He was, I don't think he was the son of a king, at 200 CE. And this was his work, and his mission was to really compile the Mishnah out of a fear that these teachings and this tradition, which until that time was oral, things were passed down orally, teacher to student, parent to child, as the Jews were being, dispersed. He saw the need to actually codify the Mishnah, which was a revolutionary thing, which was met with intense backlash, and really, really upset people, because these were divine teachings. Like, how dare he actually codify it? But he did it. He didn't start it, and he didn't complete it, but he codified many of them. And the texts really are legal texts. These are legal opinions that have really formed the backbone of all Jewish law today. Everything after the Mishnah, from Rishonim, from the Gaonim, from all these amazing time periods, all comes from the Mishnah. So the text organized oral law, and it was placed into 6 orders, Seder, so six categories. And every category contains multiple masechet, they're called. Tractates is the English word, dealing with various aspects of Jewish life, such as agriculture, festivals, marriage, purity laws, and on and on and on. So, until the Mishnah, the oral tradition of Jewish law had been passed down through generations. Due to the fear of assimilation or distortion following the destruction of the Second Temple, these texts began to be codified. This transmission continued for centuries with scholars known as the Tanaim, who we will take a closer look at soon, providing commentary and clarification. However, by the end of the 2nd century, the growing dispersion of the Jewish people and the rise of the Roman Empire led to fears that these teachings might be lost or forgotten. To preserve this valuable knowledge, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi undertook the task of compiling and editing the oral traditions into a cohesive written form, which became the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda is all over the Mishnah, he's all over the Gemara, and he's known simply as Rebbe. Anytime that the Mishnah says, Rebbe taught, Rebbe says, this is who we are talking about, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Whoops. The Mishnah represents an attempt to clarify Jewish law and became the basis for all later rabbinic scholarship. After its compilation, further layers of interpretation were added by later scholars, resulting in the Gemara, which together with the Mishnah forms the Talmud. So when we say Talmud, we're talking about Mishnah and Gemara. The Mishnah eventually, which is the operative word, eventually gained universal acceptance, establishing itself as a central work in Jewish religious thought and practice. Its influence remains profound in Jewish law and ethics right to this day. February, what are we, 18th, 19th? February 18th, 2025. It's pretty incredible if you think about it. Okay. So this is the first Mishnah I would like to take a look at, and maybe you'll tell me why I chose this Mishnah after. Can I get a volunteer to read the Hebrew? Any Hebrew readers out there? I hope it's not too small that you can see.
I can do it.
Go for it.
Okay. Moshe קיבל תורה מסיני ומסרה ליהושע, ישוע לזקנים ולזקנים לנביאים מסרוה לאנשי כנסת הגדולה. הם אמרו שלושה דברים: הווי מתונים בדין העמידו תלמידים הרבה ועשו סייג לתורה.
Thank you so much. Do I have a volunteer for the English?
I can't see it on my screen. Does everybody else have it on their screen?
Yes, I do.
I think so.
Oh, I don't know how I can get it. Okay.
Did you take a look at view? Maybe on top?
Got it. Thank you.
Can I read it?
Sure.
Okay. Moses received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. They said three things: be patient in the administration of justice, raise many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah.
Thank you so much. Let me stop the share, because when I share, I don't know about you, but I can't see everybody when I share the screen. So first, I'll say this is the first Mishnah in the book that's called Pirkei Avot, which I have a feeling many of you heard of, Ethics of Our Fathers, Ethics of Our Ancestors. Pirkei Avot is the last book of the Mishnah, which sort of barely made it in. There is sort of a theme to Pirkei Avot of ethics, of sort of what we call musar, which is like advice, but there's no real focus of it. It's a hodgepodge of Mishnahs, and you can almost feel that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was sort of pressed for time. He had all these Mishnahs, and which ones will sort of make it in. So it's like a bit of a hodgepodge. But I chose this Mishnah for a reason. And I think, well, can someone guess as to why I chose this Mishnah? To frame the Mishnah? If you want, I could put it back up so you can have a look. Right, Moses received the Torah at Sinai, transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets, prophets to the men of the great assembly, who were called Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, who were around until the destruction of the Second Temple. That's the part that I'd like to focus on more. But they and all these people, or they, said three things: be patient in the administration of justice, Hevei metunim badin, have many students, hamidu talmidim harbe, and make a fence around the Torah, vasu siag la Torah. So I like to focus on the
For me, Adam, it talks about the oral tradition.
Mm-hmm.
It's an oral tradition, and it's also giving authenticity to this tradition because it's coming from Moses to Joshua and so on. Yeah.
That's 100% right. It frames it for us, I think, as to how this got passed down. So, and Roger even took it one step further, that it gives authenticity to it. That's great. Any thoughts about the second half of the Mishnah? And they said three things: be patient with justice, raise many students, and make a fence around the Torah.
Couldn't most of the Mishnah and Gemara be interpreted as making a fence around the Torah, since they're interpreting law?
Well, can you define make a fence around the Torah? Like, how do you take that statement?
The way I understood it was that to put a fence around the Torah is to put, I guess, buffers around halakha so that you're further and further away from being able to break it. It's stringencies, basically.
Right.
At least that's what I understood.
Guardrails.
Mhm.
So for me, the two back-to-back statements of you should have many students, but make a fence around the Torah, to me seem to be in like tension with each other, because on the one hand you're saying you should share the Torah with as many people as you can, but on the other hand you're saying, but be careful and make a fence around it. So, any other comments or questions?
Adam, I just wanted to mention that, you talk about the Talmud, but there's the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Do you want to maybe mention something about that? Like, are we talking about the
I think that
Babylonian?
might be my next slide, Roger.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Right. I'll say something to just build on what Roger said. I think this period after the destruction of the temple was a period of transition, and really Judaism was being transformed from a temple centered to a study centered religion. And this text, as Roger said, it gives legitimacy to we're not inventing a new religion, we're just continuing.
That's a great point and a great historical reference and sort of framing that, yeah, that time period was probably the biggest evolution Judaism ever took, from a temple-based religion to not, to the study hall, to which ended up becoming synagogues, and Beit Midrashot. So that's 100% right. So the Gemara. So we really looked at a Mishnah. The Gemara, which came sort of, if the Mishnah was compiled in the year 200, I'd say the next 3 or 4 centuries saw the evolution and the compilation of the Gemara, is a collection of commentaries and discussion by rabbis on the Mishnah. So we'll see soon the actual format of the Gemara, but that's exactly what the Gemara is. It's conversations, it's debates, even sometimes arguments that might even get a little spicy. There's humor, and when you learn Gemara, you really get to know the rabbis and their sort of their like vibes. So it explores the reasoning behind Mishnaic law and elaborates on their application. There are 2 versions of the Talmud. I think Roger referenced this. The Babylonian Talmud, which is called Talmud Bavli, which aptly named, was compiled in Babylon. This is the more widely studied and authoritative version in Jewish tradition. When people just say Gemara, when you just say Talmud, we're talking about Talmud Bavli. And then there's the Jerusalem Talmud, the Talmud Yerushalmi, which was compiled in the land of Israel, not in Jerusalem actually, but closer to Tveria. But it's generally less studied than the Babylonian version. I've actually studied very little of the Talmud Yerushalmi myself, but there are 2 different versions. The Gemara. The Gemara explores, analyzes, and debates the laws found in the Mishnah, discussing a wide range of topics like ethics, philosophy, civil law, ritual practice, theology. The discussions often involve various rabbinic opinions, and the text can be complex with different interpretations and arguments. I can't stress this enough, the complexity of the arguments, and hopefully as we go, I think we see one of the main advantages to learning Gemara is to sharpen the mind, is to sharpen that critical thinking, and to see how the rabbis dissect an idea, and all the angles that they come at it, really is absolutely incredible. I heard years ago. I heard. So it's not fact, but I heard that they learn Gemara in South Korea, right? Like these, Koreans that aren't Jewish, but they learn Gemara because they agree that it sharpens the mind. The study of the Talmud, including the Mishna and Gemara, is a central part of Jewish learning, particularly for those who pursue advanced study in Jewish law and tradition. So I like to use the term Jewish literacy. The Gemara is just one more chapter, a huge, deep chapter of Jewish literacy. That I personally need to practice.
I have a question.
Yes, jump in, Eli.
Jump in. Eli, it's Eli. But didn't we read a few weeks ago in the Parsha Shoftim that God told Moses and Aaron to appoint judges? So why are we saying that? Why are we discussing it in the Gemara at this point? After it comes from God, so why go against it?
Well, we're not going to. I would say that. Well, first of all, I would ask anyone else if anyone else has an answer for Eli.
What?
I'm asking the group if anyone else has an answer for Eli, and it's my understanding that your question is like, what's the point of learning Gemara if it all comes from God? Then there's no conversation to be had.
Does it all come from God?
I guess that's the first question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's probably a bunch of answers, but I'm wondering if it's also the fact that life keeps changing. So you might have had a lot of discussion around principles and how they've been applied, but when new applications arise, 200 years ago, we didn't have computers. And now if we have to figure out how computers should be used, it's a whole new conversation applying old rules to new scenarios.
Beautiful. Georgette, I see your lips moving. I'm not sure if you're talking, but you're on mute.
I was saying it's also to understand. There's a text, but we have to dissect it and understand the intricacies and the secrets from it.
And it's subject to interpretation. So there's dialogue about it. It's not clear cut.
That's for sure.
And that's why the rabbis are discussing it, because they grow by discussing. They grow the ideas from one to the other, and it elaborates our knowledge.
The Gemara will discuss how certain practices or mitzvahs are found in Torah, because it's not very clear. So the Mishnah will say, we do blah, 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 blah. And then the rabbis are arguing, well, where does it say this? And one rabbi says this, and one rabbi says that. And then they go through and dissect the language of the Torah, dissect the language of the Mishnah, and in reference Torah to say, okay, it comes from this and it comes from this, to have that chain of transmission passed down.
I would like to add something. The Torah is written in a sublime poetic Hebrew, and poetry can be interpreted many different ways. So how do you know which is the right interpretation? And perhaps the purpose of the Gemara is to come up with a sort of like a consensus of what the words in the Torah really mean.
And the essence of Judaism is questioning.
Mm.
Trying
think,
to understand.
no, excuse me, Drew. I
Sorry.
think also the period of the Mishna and the Gemara are so different from the biblical period. These judges that were appointed by Moses, it's a totally different society. The society of the Talmud was a complex society with, a complex economy, things that don't at all exist in the Bible. There was money, which didn't exist in biblical times. And besides that, in the Shoftim, this presupposes a society in which the Israelites or the Jewish people are governing themselves. And this was no longer the case at the time of the Mishnah. So this is, in a way, this is much more democratic. It's whoever has the learning to do this, gets to make the rules. And since they say this all comes from Moses, it gives them permission to, how can you say it, to allow the laws to evolve, to meet new needs, and spread it. By that time, the Jews were spread out all over the Mediterranean world.
Mm-hmm. I don't really disagree with anything I just heard. I just want to elaborate on something Sky said. So the Torah tells us to do something. Let's take tefillin. So we read twice a day. Usamtem leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha. You should take a sign, an ot, put it on your hand, and take another sign and put it on your head. So I have a sign right here. So if I go like this, did I fulfill that mitzvah? Right, here's a sign. Right, here's a sign. Right, it's the Torah. I think, as Alan said, it's vague, it's poetic, and it's our belief that things were passed on orally. Right, we just saw in the Mishnah, Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Received. The whole term Kabbalah is based on that Mishnah. And we ask, what did he receive? Did he receive the written 5 books of Moses? Did he receive the 10 Commandments? Like what exactly did he receive? But it's our belief that he also received an oral tradition, that Hashem, through Moses, wrote down the Torah, and we can talk about that in another class, and the evolution of the written Torah. But alongside that came an oral tradition, which was then passed down to Yoshua, to the elders, to the prophets, on down the line to the Zoom class in the year 2025. Like we are part of this chain now. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi really saw the urgent need to put these into writing, which had enormous backlash from the Jews and from the non-Jews, from the Romans. If you think of all the rabbis that we learn about on Pesach, Rabbi Akiva, Rabban Gamliel, and what their fate was. This is the time period that we're talking about. These were the people that sacrificed their lives, really, to compile these, to teach these texts, to compile these texts. And it's our firm belief that this is not the whole, oral Torah, that there's other Torahs, texts like the Zohar, and texts made and teachings that we don't even know about anymore, or that most of us don't even know about anymore. But this is the evolution of the Mishnah and the Gemara. So I just want to talk about the characters a bit.
Excuse me, Adam. One last question. By mentioning the Zohar, are you suggesting that the Mishnah is an ongoing thing? Because the Zohar was written, hundreds of years later than the Mishnah?
I'm suggesting that there's an oral tradition alongside a written, codified group of texts that reveal themselves. So just like we didn't know about the Zohar, and there's a shadow of a doubt over the Zohar of who wrote it, where it was written, and there's sort of mystical properties to it. But the Zohar was revealed to us, right? So these teachings were, revealed to us, and they didn't exist in written form before.
Right.
But
that was my only point with the Zohar reference.
Okay.
Because the Mishnah and the Zohar could not be further apart.
I think what you're saying, Adam, is that there is an ending to the Talmud, right? It stopped, but it also, in a sense, is continuing by continuing these discussions. Although we're not formally adding these discussions into the Talmud, right? But we're continuing the tradition of this oral tradition, I guess.
100%. And I'm actually going to focus in on the oral tradition right now and sort of how it was passed down. There's sort of a hierarchical system.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
You're talking of the Zohar, but wasn't the Zohar had to do with Kabbalah? So why are we bringing it into the Talmud or the Mishnah?
I really didn't mean to cause any confusion with referencing the Zohar. That came to my mind because I said Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. That first Mishnah that we took a look at tells us Moses received the Torah from Sinai. That word kibel, which means to receive, has become the word Kabbalah, and the whole idea of Kabbalah is this idea that there's this oral tradition passed down, that there's these sort of like inner secrets, inner teachings, inner workings to text and to ritual-based Judaism that is passed down orally. And the reason it's called Kabbalah comes from that Mishnah, because we received it from Sinai. So that's the only reason that I even thought of the Zohar. But we are not talking about the Zohar. We're talking about the Mishnah and the Gemara. And I want to just take a look at the generations of rabbis. So does everyone see my screen still?
Yep.
Okay.
We're all good.
The Mishnah that we looked at stops at what were called the men of the General Assembly, Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, which was really a group of rabbis. I think it was 120 rabbis that were the leaders of the time. These people comprised what was called the Sanhedrin, which was the superior court. They comprised Kohanim, and these were the people that really dictated Jewish law of the time. After the sort of destruction of the Second Temple, the next group of rabbis were called Tanaim. So the Tanaim, who are the rabbis of the Mishnah, rabbis that are quoted in the Mishnah are called Tanaim, were the rabbis of the late Second Temple period. For instance, Rabbi Akiva is perhaps one that we've heard of. Late Second Temple period and early centuries after its destruction, their main role was to preserve and transmit the Oral Torah, which had been passed down alongside the written Torah. It had been passed down orally. They organized, edited, and codified these teachings into the Mishnah, which later became the basis for the Talmud. So the Tanaim were that first group of rabbis that lived in the first couple of centuries that really began codifying the Mishnah, and they focused on, and they developed legal traditions and applied them to daily Jewish life. I should write, mainly compiled by Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and the Tanim lived during the time of the destruction of the Second Temple and the subsequent Jewish diaspora. So Tana is the singular form, Tanaim is the plural. And when we say Tanaim, we're talking about the rabbis in the Mishnah. There's a bit of a hierarchical system, which we'll see in a minute. The Amoraim. Sorry, I couldn't find any accurate photos of them, so I had to use my own imagination. The Amoraim were the next generation of rabbis and teachers. They were responsible for expanding upon and interpreting the Mishnah, creating the Gemara, right? We said the Gemara is the sort of the conversation that the Amoraim had on trying to figure out what the heck the Tanaim were talking about. That's it exactly. The Tanaim give us this trove of Jewish law, Jewish practice, Jewish ritual, and then 2 centuries later, we're saying, what the heck are these guys saying and talking about? How did they do this? How did they do that? And we have volumes and volumes and volumes and thousands of pages, tens of thousands of pages of discourse of Amoraim trying to figure out what the Tanaim were actually talking about. They offer detailed explanations and discussions of the laws and teachings found in the Mishnah. Their debates. So really, the Gemara it's all debate, which are recorded in the Talmud, reflect a focus on legal discourse and clarification of the Mishnah. And again, there were 2 main centers of Jewish scholarship during this period, one in Babylonia and one in Palestine, right? Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi. And then I just wanted to sort of, even though we're not really going to focus on the Sefaria or the Geonim, but it's important to know the sort of historical lineage. The Sefaria were the rabbis who succeeded the Amoraim. These people really sort of finished codifying Gemara. Their period is less well known because their main role was really to edit, as opposed to the Tanaim and the Amoraim, who really contributed, was to finalize and edit the Talmudic text rather than introduce new ideas or debates. They are credited with the final editing of the Babylonian Talmud. Then we have the Geonim. So I'll just say Savoraim comes from the Aramaic word savra, which means to think. Geonim comes from Hebrew gaon, means genius. The Geonim were the heads of the major Talmudic academies in Babylonia during the early medieval period. They were responsible for making legal rulings and responding to questions from Jewish communities across the world. So this was sort of the birth of yeshivas and the sort of Rebbe. Their work marks a transition from the earlier, more academic period to a more centralized legal authority. Then my favorite, the Rishonim, which we will definitely look at. The Rishonim were the early medieval rabbinic authorities who lived after the period of the Geonim. Their era saw the development of many important commentaries on the Talmud, as well as the formulation of Jewish law in more detail through works such as the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is basically the code of Jewish law. Rishonim that we will definitely look at are Rashi, who I have a feeling many of you have heard of, which we will take a look at soon. Tosfot. Then we have the Achronim, right? So the term Rishonim comes from Rishon, they came first, and who comes after the first? The last. The Acharon. The Achronim are the later rabbinic authorities whose work continues to the present day. This group consists of the rabbis and scholars who continue to interpret and apply Jewish law in contemporary settings. I'd say most notably would be people like Rav Soloveitchik, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. These are some key figures from our time period. Okay, so now we're really starting to get to the good stuff. So when we talk about Gemara, this image is the traditional layout of the page. This is a traditional piece of Gemara text that's called the Vilna Edition. It's called the Vilna Edition because it refers to the widely used printed version of the Talmud, which was originally published in Vilna during the late 19th century, and is considered the most standard and commonly used edition today. Essentially, Vilna Edition signifies the layout and formatting style of that particular printed version of the Gemara. So even though it was printed in Vilna, this layout was used, I'm not exactly sure for how long, but it was used for a very long time. I just want to take a look. If I move my cursor, do you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a daf Gemara. This is a page of Gemara. So the format is this. The Gemara always opens with a Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah is always going to be the launch pad into what we're going to be learning about. And this happens to be the Mishnah that I would like this class to look at, which comes from Masechet Brachot, which is at the top of the page, right? Perek Rishon, the first Perek, which is called Me'ematai. So Me'ematai, Perek Rishon Brachot. And the text we will actually look at in a bit, or maybe not today because we're getting a little late. But this is the text I would like to study. This was the first tractate of Mishnah. So we looked at Pirkei Avot, the last one. Now we're going right to the beginning. This is where most people start learning Gemara, Masechet Brachot, dealing with certain laws of Tefillah. Specifically, the first page talks about the Shema. But I just want to take a look at the layout of the page. So every daf Gemara is laid out the same way. In fact, many Jewish texts, from Tanakh to others, you have the main crux of the text is this middle column, right? So you see Me'ematai. This starts the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah, and if you see my cursor, this Gimel Mem, that stands for Gemara. So the Mishnah ends with this word Ha'avira, and then we go into the Gemara. And then the Amoraim now. So now the rabbis of the Gemara will sort of pick up where the Tanaim leave off in the Mishnah. Various rabbis in the Mishnah are going to offer an opinion about a law. And now the Mishnah is going to end over here. And then the Gemara is going to take over, and there's going to be a discourse examining all the various points. So this center column is the Mishnah, always starting with a Mishnah and then jumping into the Gemara. Now, I want to look at this side of the page. This is Rashi. So Rashi, we just learned, comes from the period of the Rishonim. I think I have a slide on Rashi coming up, so we will take a look at him. Rashi is the foremost commentator pretty much on everything. Torah, Navi, Ketuvim, Gemara, and is always first base. We always want to go to Rashi. Rashi comments in a very specific style that in the sort of Torah world we call pshat. pshat is often mistranslated as simple, right? Because the word pashut in Hebrew means simple. So the pshat, but it's not the simple, it's the text-based meaning. Rashi always wants to focus on the text. What are the words saying to us? Until the time of the Rishonim, so the Tanaim, Amoraim, Savoraim, Geonim, Jewish learning was largely based on midrash, based on this oral tradition of telling how things go, how things went, what to do, what it looks like. And when the Rishonim came around, specifically Rashi, there was a desire to go back to the literal translation of the words, not so much the meanings behind them, but like the actual literal translation of the words. You would think that it would be backwards, that first we would go through literal translation of the words, and then we would dive into the, but that's actually not how it evolved. So Rashi, which is always on the inside of the daf, offers what we call pshat, the literal translation. He hardly ever asks a question. We sort of have to, like, by his comment, you have to sort of get at what in the text he saw.
I know.
Sorry? Comment, question? Okay. On the other side, so always on the inside of the page, we have Rashi. On the other side, and if you could see close enough, you'll see Rashi has his own script. The center column is pretty traditional, Hebrew print. But if you look at Rashi, his letters look a little funky. So this is called Ktav Rashi. This is Rashi's handwriting that he was known for, which is similar. It's similar more to Hebrew cursive, but it even looks a bit different than cursive. So there's a joke in the world of like yeshiva. There's a joke. So Rashi, in addition to being the world's greatest Torah commentator, was also a winemaker. It was his job. He had vineyards, and so the joke is that he was always drunk. So his handwriting was super messy. But you didn't hear that from me. On the other side of the daf, on the other side of the page, we have what's called Tosfot. So Tosfot, from the Hebrew word lehosif, which means to add, are additional commentaries. Now, until I was a teenager, or even maybe in my 20s, I thought Tosfot was a guy, that there was a guy named Tosfot. But I learned, no, the Tosfot were a group of rabbis, not even all alive at the same time, many of whom were Rashi's students. Some were even his, grandchildren. Like if anyone's ever heard of Rabbeinu Tam, is actually Rashi's grandson, and a very famous Tosefta. So the Tosfot are the additional commentaries, always found on this side of the page. And we see also the same handwriting as Rashi. Now, we have additional commentaries and footnotes and references all around the page. We have the Bach, right? Hagaot HaBach. And, these are all commentaries. We have the Ein Mishpat, Ner Mitzvah, the Or HaShalem, Rabbi Hananel, and most Gemaras have a whole section in the back that we call the guys in the back, and it's just a million comments on every word of Jewish text. So this is the traditional page of Gemara.
Adam, on sefaria, is it in that format?
No.
No. So how is it presented if you go online and look at the Talmud?
Sefaria has the same format for all its, if it's Torah or Gemara, where it'll have regular printed with the vowels and then English translation. So I actually have Sefaria coming up to show, because I think as we jump into the text, we will definitely use Sefaria. But I would also always like to come back to the traditional page, because we should get just more and more comfortable with it. I see a hand. Rhoda.
Yeah. Could you put back that page of the Talmud that you had? I wanted to ask you the far right section beside Rashi. What did you say that was? The far right, that column.
So on the both the right and the left outer columns are just additional commentaries.
Okay.
So the names of the commentaries, usually, not always, are headers. So we have Masoret Hashem, Hashas, excuse me. We have the Bach, the Shem. So quite often, and actually Rashi is no exception, we call these people by the acronyms of their names. So Rashi, which we'll see maybe even on the next page. Here, who was Rashi? A renowned French Jewish scholar, rabbi, and commentator, considered one of the. He was the most important figure in Jewish Torah commentary, by far. We would have nothing. We would have no further. He advanced Torah learning. It's just really just incredible. His full name was Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. So Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, Resh Shin Yud, Rashi. Rashi is best known for his comprehensive commentaries on the entire Tanakh and Talmud. His biblical commentaries explain the text in simple language. So it's simple, not meaning superficial at all, and often include linguistic, historical, and cultural insights that help clarify the meaning of difficult or ambiguous passages. And he actually often uses French in his comments. His Talmudic commentaries are equally influential, offering explanations and legal analyses that have become fundamental to Jewish study. We do not study Jewish text without Rashi, point final. Rashi's works have had a lasting impact on Jewish learning, and his commentaries are still widely used today by scholars and students of the Bible and Talmud. His ability to make complex texts accessible and his focus on practical understanding have earned him a revered place in Jewish tradition. We have a lot to be thankful to Rashi for. That is for sure. So that was always on the inside of the page. Tosfot.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Could you just say a word about how the Stein Schneider, I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, edition fits into all of this?
Steinmetz.
No, Steinsaltz.
Steinsaltz, yes, Steinsaltz. Yes.
So Steinsaltz, Adin Steinsaltz was his name, who was an Achron. He's, contemporary. I think he died maybe 5 years ago. I was just learning his commentary on Rambam's Mishna Torah. So he's in that line of rabbis that are producing contemporary books and texts commenting on everything from Mishnah to Gemara and on down the line. He would quote Rashi all the time. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not exactly sure what the question was.
No, I know he published a a new edition of the Talmud, I believe, with translation into modern Hebrew and comments that draw on tradition and also on, historical and linguistic things that make a lot of the references clear. And I don't remember what the format is. I don't think it's the same as.
So I don't know his format for Gemara. I know, for instance, Art Scroll has a wonderful Gemara, and what they do, and I have a feeling that he would sort of copy that layout, is on the one hand they have the actual traditional, Vilna Edition page, and on the opposite, and I may even have one here. I don't know if I hold this up to my screen, it's probably not a great.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, but this is a great example of the traditional Vilna style text over here, and then on the opposite page, all the bold letters reference the direct quotes, and then you have English translation. And then commentary, and then you even have, I believe you have Rashi down here. And so, Steinsaltz didn't. I don't know if he did it into English, because the Rambam I have of his is in Hebrew. But he is yet another person that is making Torah accessible. But I have this is called the Schottenstein version of the Gemara, published through Art Scroll, and it's amazing.
But it seems, William, that it follows it, or Adam, that it follows page by page the Vilna edition, and it follows each page, right? So it's a double portion of the Talmud, I guess. It's his commentary or his version or his comments to the Vilna edition of the Vilna edition.
That's right. I mean, I'll show you. I could show you his. Do I have? Here it is. So this is another Rishon, Rambam. His collection called Mishna Torah. And so Steinsaltz, so he has all the texts from the Rambam in the middle, and then his commentary on the side. So I would think that he would do
I'm sorry? Is that
Is
also considered the Talmud? The second book? No. Okay.
No.
Adam, I have to excuse myself.
Okay.
It's Eli. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, settle up quite soon. I don't want to keep people too long.
Okay.
Talk Gemara for hours. So
I thank you very much. Take care. We'll be in touch.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
So let's just finish up with Tosfot, who is not just one person, but a collection of scholars, mainly from France and Germany, who were active from the 12th to the 15th centuries, including the students and descendants of Rashi, who sought to further explain, clarify, and expand upon his commentaries, especially on the Talmud. They addressed questions, contradictions, and ambiguities in Rashi's interpretations, adding deeper analysis, alternative readings, and often raising complex legal or philosophical questions. Personally, I find Tosfot a lot harder to absorb than Rashi. They were concerned with understanding the Talmud's teachings and reconciling apparent discrepancies within it. Okay, so really, I think that was a lot of information. This is an excerpt of the Mishnah from the Vilna Edition that I'd like to maybe start. I guess we'll start next week. And just, I think Roger was asking about sefaria. So this is really what sefaria looks like, and what thanks we have to give to the people at sefaria for just making this so accessible, and the amount of resources that we have up on sefaria.org, if you're not all familiar with it. But we see it takes, the beginning of the Mishnah, Me'ematai korin et Shema ba'ravin. So we're going to ask the question, from when do we recite the Shema at night? And we'll perhaps leave off with the question for next week. But the opening question of the Mishnah is, from when do we recite the Shema at night, right? So Sefaria puts in the dots for us. And then from what time does one recite the Shema in the evening? So that was a bit of an overview. We talked about oral tradition. We talked about the transmission of the Oral Torah, a little bit of history in terms of generations of rabbis, some of the personalities of Tanaim and Moraim, specifically Rishonim, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and again, it's called a taste in Talmud because any one of these periods or people or things, I mean, a whole class can be taught on just one element of the things that we talked about. So it's really just to frame what is the Talmud, what is the Mishnah, what is the Gemara, so that we can maybe start to learn one. So if you're into it, next Tuesday we will begin to ask the question, from when can we until what time, or from when and until what time can we recite the Shema in the evening? And we're going to see some unexpected answers. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it was great. Really, really great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Adam. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
I have 5 pages of notes.
Okay. Well, I'm also happy to send my PowerPoint out. If people...
Oh, could you?
Sure.
Like, how do we get it? You're going to email it to us?
If you received my email reminder about this class, I will send it.
Yes.
To the same.
Yes, please. Thank you.
That would be great.
Pleasure.
Tonight you sent just the reminder. I had to go back a few days ago when you actually have the Zoom link. Did you mean to send the Zoom link tonight?
Yeah, we got it tonight. I got it
Okay.
today.
All right, fine. I didn't get it. Okay.
So just so you all know, it's the same Zoom link for all 4 classes.
Okay.
Will you send a reminder though every week?
I promise I'll try to not forget.
Okay.
That's the best.
Otherwise, you got to go all the way down all your emails and yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night. Thank you.
And I mean, it is not too late to say the Shema right now at night, so I'll just give you that answer. That if anyone wants to say the Shema, you are allowed to say it right now before bed. Laila Tov. Good night.
Laila Tov.
Take care.